Welcome to the Intern Whisperer. Our show is all about the future of work and innovation. Today's guest is Spencer Elliott, who was a previous Intern Whisperer guest when he founded Viewstone. He is an experienced CEO, investor, exited founder, mentor, and a graduate from University of Central Florida and UCF. Oh, sorry, University of Florida. Gosh, both of them. And I actually went to both schools. That's shameful. Okay, but good for you. He supports the startup ecosystem here in Orlando, and he is now with Plug and Play here in Orlando, and he is overseeing the smart cities. Spencer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Isabella, for having me back. I appreciate it so much.
Yes,
Go Gators, right? Go Knights.
yes, go Gators. Da, 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 da. We'll do that little thing right there too.
It's a tongue twister to
Um,
say those schools
it
together.
is.
you know.
It is. I remember when you were at one of my first shows, but you had a co-founder, but I know you're the lead founder. But anyway, this time it's you solo. So I'm very happy to have you back, and this is exciting. Let's kick it off with, if you would please share your personal story about where you either went to school, and I think we kind of covered it, but you can tell us a little more about what you specialized in, to how you got to where you are now.
I grew
Okay.
up here in Central Florida, and I've been going to schools here locally in Orlando. I ended up going to Lake Howell High School in Winter Park to graduate, and then went through to Seminole State, which is a local state school here in Florida, and was able to get my AA degree, which gave me a direct transfer into UCF. And being, the first person in my family to graduate from college, it was really creating my own path and really understanding how to navigate the system. So I was able to, work my way, through the restaurants and hospitality jobs that I had, as well as with internships that I remember one of them was paying me, I think it was $500 a month. And I thought that was a ton of money at the time, and
Yeah.
was able to pay my rent with that. But yeah, just kind of worked my way up through the ranks and just try to get as much experience as I could. Ended up working actually with one of my professors from UCF in the UCF incubator for one of the first startups that I ever had exposure to. It was called Learn Everywhere, and it was a great experience. And that was my first exposure to what an investment could look like into a company and how that can run. And so yeah, it's just been a long journey, and ended up, thinking that I should climb the corporate ladder and worked at a company called TravelClick right out of UCF. And I always thought that I wanted to get an MBA, but there was some changes at UCF, and I was no longer able to attend UCF for my master's degree in business. It was only engineering and medical school students at the time. And so I ended up having to look around at other schools, and the University of Florida had a program for entrepreneurship. And I thought that was awesome because I had been attending Orlando Tech events at the Church Street Exchange building right outside of the Starter Studio, and I was very inspired to get into entrepreneurship. But it was really just I thought it was cool, and Shark Tank was very popular at the time, and all of these things. But I didn't realize that I truly wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I didn't really know what that was at the time. And so I just thought, if I'm going to get a master's degree, I might as well get one that is in venture finance, teaching me how to be a CEO. We had overlapping classes with the Masters of Management, the Masters of International Business, the MBA students, the Masters of Finance. And so I thought that that was the perfect place for me. And so went through the program, started a company while I was there, started a couple of small ventures that I thought were fun, and just worked through the process of the first 100 days of running a company and building out pitch decks and just really having a great experience, just kind of testing and learning entrepreneurship. And I worked for a company called Eventplicity while I was there, and that was a lot of fun, and was able to really see another startup that had significant. I think they were, raising at the time, but had raised several $1 million into the business. And I saw an entrepreneur in the CEO that managed multiple businesses, and that was really the first exposure that I had to someone who was a serial entrepreneur firsthand. And I remember one of my professors at UF at the time had exited for $600 million, and showed me, that that's possible, right? And I was just always asking him his experience and what it was like, and anywhere that he was going, I wanted to go, right? And so it was really a time for me to soak up as much knowledge as I could, and really just get my hands wet, or hands dirty, or whatever you want to call it, and feet wet, hands dirty, and just jump right in. And that was what I was doing. And then so when I came back to Orlando, I actually ended up working for Travel Click again, and really wanted that stable kind of career path for myself. And in due time, in quick time, I was able to, save up enough where I was able to take a risk on myself and start ViewStub, which we talked about last time on the show. And you and I have been friends for a long time, so you know the whole story. But ran that company for about 5 years, and that was a lifetime of entrepreneurship in itself. Being that COVID really spurred all of our demand from the marketplace, and going up against the fastest growing company in the history of the world, which was Hopin, and they had raised $1 billion, and we were raising a few million in Orlando. So, yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Wow, that's amazing. I forgot to mention also that your dad, and I know that you always like to share that you're a family man. So feel free to drop any of those little things in there too, if you wish. I know it's part of your story, so it's totally
Did.
good.
That's really the reason I came back to Orlando, was for family. And we found out that we were pregnant right when we graduated at UF. And so I thought, man, I need to get back to a stable income, and I can't be taking risks out here, right now. And so even though I was ready to start a business at that time, that's really, life comes at you, and gives you challenges, and you have to be able to adapt. And so that's entrepreneurship itself, right? And so
Yeah.
that's what we did, and so we did that for about a year and a half before we were able to feel comfortable enough. And funny story, I'll be very transparent about it. My wife and I thought about it, and we said, if this doesn't work in 1 year, then, and like my mentors had told me at the time, you go back to where you started. And for me, that was going back to the career that I had already built in the travel and hospitality industry, and for software, tech company. It's like, cool, I can know they would take me back, right? Or another company would take me back. And so there was really no risk to me. It was like, okay, if not now, when? If I don't do this now, it's just going to get harder and harder for me to take these risks. And so, I would encourage anybody to take that leap of faith, if you're feeling the urge, because you'll figure it out.
That is very true. And many times, and as you know, I've done this for a little while. And one of my mentors had said, the way I understand it, you've done this in phases. So for those that are doing it for quite a few years, and I'll pass it on because I know you're a mentor, they said, well, it sounds like your first couple of years, you were doing a lot of research on it and discovery. And I would go, well, that's true. And he said, then you seem to have moved into a phase of you were testing it as you as a service, and you're the algorithm. I said, that's true. And I said, now you're going into the technology phase. So really you haven't, yes, you validated it. That's true. But doing it as a tech company, you haven't done that yet. And I went, oh, that's hopeful. So there's phases. Who knew? Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it that way, but I do now.
Yeah, and if it's not
So
challenging, it's not innovative, and if it's not innovative, it's not worth doing, really. And so you have to find that for yourself. It definitely has to be aligned with your passions. Um, and I do an exercise with some of the mentees that I talk to, and kind of help them design their motivating factors into alignment, so that they can choose things that are going to be more cohesive with something that they're going to be successful in. Let's just say.
yeah,
That's a really good way to start your career, especially for young students coming out of college and things like that. Because that's what I did. I just wrote down on a piece of paper all the themes in my life that I was interested in and passionate about, or things that I wanted to pursue. And then I tried to prioritize them and group them. And then I got to a short list. And then I like determined that I wanted to start ViewStub, because I wanted to go to events for free, but I didn't want to work at them, but I wanted to make money from them. And I wanted to be able to meet all the artists. And so and I wanted it to be streaming. And so I literally came up with the business based on those things. And then also that I wanted to solve a problem for myself, which was I couldn't attend all of these events that were happening across the country or across the world. And they were all happening pretty much simultaneously, but I could stream them, and I could, watch them, if I wanted to watch the content. And so, you know, That's what I
So
encourage.
that's the beginnings of USTEP.
Yeah, and anyone can do that. I just worked with an entrepreneur yesterday and went through that exercise. We spent about 15 minutes and got down to where he had a very destined plan for himself. So of course we manifest these things, right? But the plan that we outlined, the first thing I said is, this is not where it's going to be when you end up, right? This is just where you're starting. This is where you're going,
Yeah.
right? You're gonna adapt. You're gonna pivot, and you're gonna find where you should it, and so, but you like all these things down that path, at least what you should do is you should test it out, right? To validate, to your point, right? Like, so
Yeah.
maybe you don't start the business right away. Maybe you go find someone else who's a vendor and you just get a job with them and see, because he needed a job too. So it's like, okay, well, you want a summer job, do this instead. Don't get a summer job that's not aligned with where your end goal is. He's thinking about these other jobs. It's like, well, why don't you just, you're going to get paid the same amount. Why don't you do something that can at least give you exposure to
Yeah.
the industry that you think you want to be in? And so those types of small changes in people's behavior can really mean a lot in the end.
That's very true. That's good advice. Good advice there. Okay, so let's talk about your role with Plug and Play. At Plug and Play, they're actually out of California. I know that. And I had met Alex Tran. I don't know if you've met him yet, but you know him? Good. I met him, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago. We'll say 5. And he's still there, and he really impressed me with what Plug and Play can do, but I know you know more because you've been immersed in it. Um, they're always helping startups, and they help in a lot of ways, but a lot of it is they don't take equity too. That's an amazing thing. Can you walk us through the process of how Plug and Play works with startups to accelerate their growth?
Absolutely. And plug and play really is, from what I've seen in the short time that I've been in the role, a few weeks now, really focused on impact. And I think that's one of the biggest things that they do is really bring a win-win-win situation to all parties involved. And I love that they have the three elements of their business model built into the fabric so that we're not only accelerating the startups, like you said, but we're investing in the startups as the most active venture capital firm in the world. And we're also working with our partners to ensure that we're meeting their goals by connecting them with these startups. And so connecting is the other theme that I see within the framework of Plug and Play's model, is that we're making sure that these startups are receiving value, but also the partners are receiving value. So whether that's a proof of concept or some type of trial, or the ability for us to have them really work together as partners, or maybe that entity that we're working with, like Orange County government or Duke Energy or Tavistock, Lake Nona, our current partners, right? And so, sorry, so we also have new partners that we just added. So I guess this is going to air at the right time, but we have KPMG as well. So, these partner and UCF, and so these partners all have their own interests and goals, of course. And so it's us in the middle of these competing efforts, right? And really being that web and I think the glue to really make it all happen. And so I just think that plug and play is a needed system that's put into place inside of an environment or an ecosystem like Orlando, or like Florida, that can really create a lot of exponential growth. And so that's what I love about it. And for the startups,
Mm.
like I said, we don't take any equity. We certainly would look to invest in those companies ourselves, but then also, yeah, so we want to help them grow their business. We also want to help them with their first customers and connecting them with mentors. And so we have a huge mentor network, and we just try to do as much as we can, including show of hundreds of attendees. And so I think that's a great opportunity for them as well to meet new investors in the community.
So I know, just so our listeners know, we're experiencing a little bit of lag, but just hang in there with us because it just comes right back up. It's the holidays. What can we say? So Plug and Play. And you mentioned something about being in Lake Nona, and I know there's an emphasis on a smart city. What is the definition of a smart city? And then, what is it that you guys are doing out there specifically in this smart city area?
Right. I mean, smart cities really encompasses so many different technologies, whether that be deep tech, mobility, health, defense, semiconductors. And so when we say smart cities, we're just thinking about few Orlando in some respects. And so we want to look at companies that are investing in infrastructure, energy, it could be space, working with the military. And so right now, smart cities is somewhat of a catch-all. And so we look at different industry verticals based on where our partners have the most interest. And so we can spin up a vertical with the university that focused on research. We've most recently started the semiconductor location, and so that's been active for about a year. And I know that there's several, maybe a dozen partners over there involved in that building and in that campus, and there's plans for expansion. And so that's a unique undertaking. But every time we go in it with a custom approach, and so every single day, our team is working to create value specifically to the individual parties involved. And so it's a very hands-on thing that we do.
So, what trends are you seeing in the startup world around this concept of smart cities? I love the fact that you mentioned mobility, transportation, healthcare. Those are a lot of things, as you well know. One of the community roles that I have here in Orlando is with Game Jams and Startup Weekend. So I see those organizations as OMG Labs, Indynomicon, and Startup Weekend as ways that we could help support what Plug and Play is doing. But what are the trends that you think are going to be happening in the startup world around smart cities?
Awesome. Yeah, great question. And I think I recognize some of the folks on the wall in the background of your picture here. So, no, I love our community. I'm very excited about Plug and Play being involved here because I think it just brings a lot of excitement and interest in some of the things that are happening. But with the trends that we're seeing, we certainly are very excited about space, being that we're so close in proximity to the Space Coast. We love the augment of AI and love seeing where AI is being implemented in new technologies. And I think what it's doing is really increasing our data capture capabilities and um, suggestive type of actions. And so if the convenience factor goes up, the people will spend money. And so that's kind of where I think the luxury brands will start to take notice. And I think that there's a lot of technology that can implement AI. And so we'll see where that will go. But I also am really excited about just infrastructure. And when I think about infrastructure, I really think about like mobility, transportation, to your point. And so um, right now, Orlando has a unique challenge in that there's a lot of population growth. And so I've just been kind of keeping my eye on how that is unfolding and how the entities involved are maintaining and keeping up with the pace. So that's an interesting task to accomplish. So
Mm. Let's talk about future funders. I know that's something else that you've started. And at some point, I'm going to apply to come and pitch there at some point. It's coming up pretty soon. It's definitely 2025, first quarter. Um, anyway, you've worked with countless startups. And why did you choose to start Future Funders? I consider it maybe an angel investor group, but I'm not sure. Maybe you're going in the direction of VC.
yeah, and funny enough, I ended up keeping this shirt on because I realized I put it on this morning. So to support our
Yeah.
friends at 1 Million Cups, and I know that they're in that same building. But yeah, it's fun, doing the pitch events is a great time, and we want our members to be able to have access. And so when I talk about future funders, the first thing I think about is providing access. And it's really about creating a community. And so we want to be the first check into any company. That's kind of our first thesis. And so being early stage is something that we're passionate about, but also we believe that our thesis is potentially the most profitable model there could be with venture capital. And so it's a very innovative approach to a somewhat stagnant industry. I mean, of course, there's been crowdfunding in recent years, and there's been other changes, and especially this year, there was legislation to allow unlimited non-accredited investors for up to 10,000 a year. And so there's different things that are happening that are definitely improvements. But if you take certain elements of our model, like the fact that we're a rolling fund, and so we don't have a specific term or deadline to raise our fund, right? Let me just make sure this is not affecting the audio.
You're
That's
good. You're totally
so
good.
that's one element. And we really want to allow non-accredited investors to invest. And the reason for that is because as a founder in Central Florida, I've just seen and participated and had the conversations around, is there enough angel capital, and do the funds that are preaching that, are they moving up that funnel? And so, not to complain or anything, but I think that there was room for improvement. And one challenge that I try to help with is that, right? And so I think this will allow folks that are not currently angel investors, that are not professional investors, to get interested in what's happening in venture capital and have a lane that they can feel like they're comfortable enough to invest with a fund like ours. So it's approachable. And so with a minimum of $800 a month or 10,000 a year roughly, you can participate, you can invest in this fund, and you don't have to be an accredited investor. And accredited meaning, high net worth and high salary. And so if you're just a regular person and you have some extra income, then this is a fund for you, right? And this is a fund where you can actually get into a lot of cool startups based out of Central Florida, and actually come to some events. And so the events that we host party was a comedy magic show, and then we went and watched people on a bull do an electronic bull riding thing, and they were jumping off, and so that was fun. But we just try to get together, invest often, and be a part of our community. That's really our motto.
Wow, that is really refreshing because I know that I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but our ecosystem of investment or interest in investing in tech companies in Central Florida is just not where other places are, like Miami or even Jacksonville and definitely Tampa. There's so much more that's going on in those areas. I don't know why Central Florida just doesn't get on it. But it seems like most of the companies that have done well have had to leave Central Florida, definitely even Florida, to get investment and go someplace else, anywhere else in the United States. So I'm glad you're wanting to be one of the people that can make that change happen here for us in Central Florida, because it's frustrating. It definitely is. I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it's one of the areas when you were saying something, I felt like you saw a problem and you were bringing a solution. And it's just one of what I hope is many.
Yeah, and it's exciting because as the fund grows, because it's somewhat unlimited, we also have a follow-on fund. We also have a later stage fund. So we're going to be able to participate in different phases of a company's life cycle, and I'm excited about that. So as they're going through the stages, and growing from pre-seed to seed, we can keep investing, and I think that's really going to change the way that companies grow here in Central Florida, but also allowing them to have that foundation, similar to how, companies that are coming out of the Peter Thiel Fellowship, or, those that are getting a standard deal like ours, that early boost prevents them from giving up, and folding. And I've seen that happen so many times where good founders start good companies, but can't get interest because they don't have enough traction. But it's like a chicken and the egg, right? So
Yeah.
crossing the chasm in 0 to 1. So it's it's sometimes necessary for that first just small check, to get them to get their MVP built, to get some customer interactions going, and to be able to maybe even just support themselves, and so that they can eat. So, yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Definitely. So what do you think the most common mistakes startups make when they seek funding?
Well, I do see a lot of founders looking really far out into the future and projecting. And I think that's just been common for a long time is to show a 5-year pro forma. And so when I look at pitch decks, don't give too much credit beyond years 2 and 3, just because I do know that things will change. Um, it is important to have a realistic view on that. So you can include 5 years, and I think it should be very conservative in years 4 and 5. And it used to be that you want to show these spikes and returns, but I think that's for me as the investor to extrapolate on in my mind, right? Or for us to talk about for expansion plans. But I would rather see, this is just me personally, in my opinion, right? I would rather see what the operating expenses are going to be kind of like in a worst case scenario, right? Like the most expensive, but making the least amount of revenue to see what that would look like, to see how long this company can survive if things aren't going 100% amazing, right? Which is not likely. And so I kind of like to paint a really realistic picture. And so that's where I coach a lot of the startups that I work with is like, can we just get this to a place where we can both agree on it? And then we could talk about, oh, if things go great, this is the rocket ship, of course. So that's just one thing that sticks out when I talk about that. But the big themes with founders is with that same mindset of I need to plan everything out all the way through 5 years, right? Or 10 years, 15 years, however you want to think about it. When realistically, some of these early stage startups are probably not even past the first like 5 days, of
Mhm.
like I need to I need to do some more research on even this business problem, right? Because sometimes when you ask them questions and they don't even have a full grasp of the problem that they're solving. And so if you're not an expert in the problem that you're solving, then you're probably not going to be the best person to solve that problem. There's probably other people who have put more time and effort into solving that problem than you currently have. And so that's where I think founders can spend a little bit more time is talking with customers that they would potentially sell to and asking them to buy something from them. And that last piece is the most important because a lot of the time I do hear founders, they don't ask for the close and they want to give their product away for free as a trial, or they want to get beta users, but that doesn't do anything for you. I would rather hear no, to my proposal and then ask why. Because then I'm going to get a lot of data and feedback from that interaction, right? And so if I can ask a customer, hey, would you pay $100 for this and I'll start tomorrow and be dead serious, even though I have no software technology or anything, I'll figure it out, right? If they're willing to pay for it. And it has to be at a price that makes it worth it for me to do that thing. And then so if that doesn't work, then now I'm forced to go and figure out what does work. Okay, so then how can I scale this, right? And so those hard pivots, I think, need to happen very quickly. And so it's a forced interaction. And I'll give credit to Mike Mason, who taught me this concept, and he was a mentor at ViewStub. And it really has changed the way I think about doing early stage business because you just don't have enough time to, go through the motions, so to speak. You need to really just cut corners, right? And so the easiest way to do that is just go full speed until you hit a brick wall and then be like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try something else, and then go full speed again, hit the brick wall, and then figure out why. You know what I mean? Every single time. And I don't know if that's making sense, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's just like that Facebook CEO had said is, fail fast, right? So you're just talking about hitting the wall. You've got it, Zuckerberg. You have to do that. Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll probably just get burned out doing laps, if that's the analogy.
Hmm.
So, no,
Yeah,
it just
very
gets
much
tired
so.
of laps. And you're not really breaking any walls. You're not innovating, right? You really need to be pushing all the time.
Well, we're going to take a moment and acknowledge our sponsor, Cat 5 Studios, and we will be right back.
The Intern Whisperer is brought to you by Cat 5 Studios, who help you create games and videos for your training and marketing needs that are out of this world. Visit Cat 5 Studios for more information to learn how Cat 5 Studios can help your business. Thank you, Cat 5 Studios.
So we're back to the second half of our show, and today's guest is Spencer Elliott. And we're going to be talking about, in this part of the show, the future of jobs and industries in 2030. So, Spencer, what do you think the future is going to look like for your industry, whether it's startup or if it's in funding, investing, what do you think it's going to look like?
Sure. From the industry perspective, I think that we are seeing that more VCs are using AI to evaluate companies. And I think that's okay. It's kind of like with recruiting or when people are applying for jobs, there's of course that AI layer. And I think that has an opportunity because then that AI can provide feedback to the startup and to the founding team and really help them craft their pitch prior to even meeting with the VC team. And so I think it'll help them to curate better outcomes. So yeah, I think it's all positive from that perspective. Um, and the future, in general, for smart cities and kind of the concept that we're looking for in Florida is more of an interconnected, not Internet of Things per se, but the ability for us to maximize, I think, our output and productivity as a society. And of course, we've been doing that for decades, in the information era and with technology, but even more so now. And I think without our own uh, prompting, so to speak, like prompting is very um, inherent inside of AI right now. We have to kind of ask it to do things, but I see a future where it's deciding for us. And I think that's where a lot of the fear comes in, and really trying to build technology. And this is where I think there's a huge opportunity is building counteractive technologies to protect us from AI, if that makes sense. So I think that's where cybersecurity companies are going to pivot. That's where I think there's going to be new majors coming out of school, and it's kind of like a cyber warfare, but against ourselves, not just foreign entities, right? Because we're the ones still using the AI. And I think that that's going to be very big, but also around authenticity. And so those are the two themes. So proving that something is authentic coming out of AI. So a truth-seeking AI that can really be foundational. And I don't know where religion will come into this, but I think that everyone's going to try to lay some stake in it, especially governments. And so everyone's going to try to impose their own Declaration of Independence or Constitution onto this. But it's going to be crazy. I think like the history that we know of today is coming to like an inflection point, and there's going to be a new era, and the new era is just going to be built off of like how do we create a technology that is resembling our society and that we can almost translate to intergalactic type of communications. And because we already are seeing all these drones, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if we're planning on living on Mars, like I think that there in the next 20 years is going to be some type of instance of communication with some extraterrestrial life form. And so if we're almost there, then I think that that's probably what we got to be thinking about, right? How are we going to communicate with other worlds, and what's that going to mean for our safety as human beings on Earth? And so I hope it unites us, and to bring everything full circle. And I think about this a lot. I think that that'd be the one uniting thing is if it was like Earth versus Mars, or something like that. And so I
Mhm.
almost love to see that, not like that we get into war with another planet in another galaxy, but that we unite as one race, as like humans, right? Human beings, because I think that's one of our biggest downfalls as a society. That oh, you live on one side of the planet, so I don't like you. Like you
Yeah.
live across that line, so I don't like you. It's kind of, or you have a different, way of life. Oh, I don't like you.
It's just how people look at it here on Earth, right? Oh, you're from China. No, because of whatever. So you're just expanding it so it's more outside of just this planet. And people could be, if you were thinking about it from the viewpoint of like Star Wars, we'll go with Star Wars. And you're going through and you see all of these different types of what we might call creatures, but living beings, they will look different. They could be, speaking our language. Maybe we have this new technology. I've seen this advertised where you can put something in your ears, little earbuds, and you can understand any language. Wouldn't it be amazing if it could do that with extraterrestrial languages?
Yeah. The one I love is it's been around for a long time, but Google Translate, the app, if you put it over text, like even signs, it'll translate it into the language that you want. And that technology's been around for a long time, and I always try to show it to people that don't know about it, especially when they're traveling, because it makes it so much easier to just read in your own language. But anyway, yeah,
Okay. You just taught me that. I did not know that.
Oh, great. I hope everyone goes and tries it. It's really amazing. Yeah. And you can translate it into other languages. So, but it shows it right as an overlay right on the screen. I think I've been using it for over a decade, which is, Google has some awesome stuff. But, with that whole unification and utopia, I think there's still in our society, there will always be a common enemy, unfortunately, that's kind of good and evil will always have its place. And that, that temptation and greed are always going to be a part of our nature, unfortunately. I do believe that. And so it's like we have to unify against something, unfortunately. I don't believe that we'll ever just have world peace. And that's just a sad truth. But if we can learn to live with that, then I think we can actually learn to work together.
Yeah.
So as long as we all realize that, then I think we'd actually be better off. So anyway.
So, what are the positive aspects of Gen AI? What do you think it is?
Well,
I know you touched on some of it.
there's the clear cut ones, just the time savings, cost savings. It could be, actually replacing team members, unfortunately. But what that does, big picture, is it creates new jobs, right? And so there's always going to be a place for somebody to fit into the wheel. It's just what is that now going to be? And so one job might get phased out, but now who's creating the next AI, right? And so there's a new role, and so it's actually good. A lot of people are afraid of that. It's one of the biggest fears is that it's going to take your job. But that's evolution, right? That's innovation, and so I don't think that's a bad thing.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate because people love this on the show too. Yes, that's true. It will eliminate jobs, but there are jobs that are there for a reason, and it's to protect people, protected classes. So those could be people with disabilities. Those could be somebody with Down syndrome. They may not be a computer programmer, but they are there and they're a barista at Starbucks, or they are there and they greet people in McDonald's. There's a McDonald's here in Orlando that has no people. There's places where having people is the highlight of them going out because this world is becoming, because it is so digital, it is becoming even more aware of how lonely people are. So I feel like there's a place that just because we can do it with AI doesn't mean we should do it with AI.
Oh yeah, and that's us driving 100 miles per hour at the wall. And what's going to happen is that we're all going to sit and realize our reality, and you're going to see restaurants coming out with we have real servers, and people are
Yeah.
going to walk to them if there's a real demand for it, right? And so as we go in the wrong direction ever, we will always autocorrect, right? And so I think even hear Elon talk about that with removing agencies in the government. Like if we remove one and it should go back, we'll put it back, right? And so they even talk about it too. The biggest CEOs, they talk about being back in the office, right? They want their team back in the office, right? We don't want them to be working from home because it's not fair that your Uber Eats driver also has to get in the car and drive to your house, right? The person that made your food, right? Like yes, a lot of us have the luxury to work from home, and you think that should be the norm. But what about the people that are building your road, right? Or are performers, right? In the arts, we need these things, right? This is part of our human nature, is to be social and to interact and to be out in the park, throwing a frisbee or whatever.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's
We're
important.
supposed to be social. We're meant to be social. And so as such, having a community is not just an online community. It is where people get together to have face-to-face interaction. And the grid will go down someday. And when it does, if we don't know how to communicate more effectively, listen, not texting or messaging or whatever, or even the avoidance of having phone conversations, it's going to be something that's just direly needed. And it's that pendulum has already swung in that direction. So I'm hoping to see that people go, oh yeah, we do need to keep balance.
This is an interesting conversation. I know it's not a typical business conversation, but one thing to watch from that would be the birth rate going down, right? So just over a long period of time, right? Because if we're not having physical interaction, I think you know where I'm going with that, but that would be something that would be a consequence for sure. Is the less long-term relationships, less nuclear family situations, and I think that could be a huge challenge for our well-being as a society because, yeah, we'd be able to have more resources, but also less people to help kind of grow our society. So
I like that we're covering both sides of the questions because there's the gentleman, Jeffrey Hinton, and he's the creator of AI. He's called the godfather of AI. And it was in the late 50s, early 60s, in that time frame where there were a lot of white men that were up in schools that are in the northern area of the United States. Pick one. It's Harvard, MIT, all of these schools. And he said one of the ways in which these systems, AI, might escape control is by writing their own computer code to modify themselves. So that means a human has allowed that to happen. And if that is something that's happened, there's ethics that we're talking about that are in here. Hinton also said, and that's something that we need to seriously worry about. And I would agree with that because we have created a lot of what we see. And the people that were back in the late 50s, early 60s, if you ever saw the cartoon, The Jetsons, they're streaming it on Hulu. It's really entertaining because that show was not for kids. That show was for grown-ups because they were talking about cars that could fly. They were talking about microwaves, which had not been invented at that time. They were talking about 3D printers. They were talking about all of these things that have been dreams, and we've seen them coming to fruition. That's about 60 years ago. So when we were hearing this, and that's when they created AI too, is way back at that time, we had this desire, and we'll go to the biblical stuff since you also opened something up there. The thirst for knowledge, to be like God, to know all. We're creating that. So I think it's important to remember that the ethical dilemmas are part of this kind of a conversation that you and I are having, and people, way above my pay grade have already been doing too.
yeah, it is scary because everything that's written now has to be questioned. And
Yeah,
that's not something that's ever happened before. Or I guess it has, but um, it used to be the bias of the human, right? And so
right.
that's fine, right? I think we all understood that. But now we're not even sure if it was human, right? And so it's a concerning notion that we have to now discern. Is this even us saying this from prompts, using people's likeness and their voice to say whatever, it's going to be really hard for us to trust anymore what we see and what we've always kind of trusted. Oh, I saw a video, even like that's evidence in murder cases, right? But now it's like, was that doctored? It was transmitted through how many, services, text message and other, platforms, and has it been altered through those
Mm-hmm.
it's like a game of telephone, right? And now everyone has an opportunity. It's too open source now. Everything's too open source. So that's where the blockchain, I think, is going to become almost inconsequential, consequential. Sorry, I think it's going to be very important to use something like the blockchain to just essentially validate things because otherwise, without a ledger like that, there's just going to be chaos. So.
I agree. So, what is the best mentoring advice that we're at the end of the show? It's so hard to believe. But what is the best mentoring advice that you want to share with our listeners about the future?
Um, you know, I think it's something to be said about, selling shovels to everyone while they're going to the gold mine, or the gold rush. And that's where I think some of the largest companies are gonna come out of this, right? Is the ones that are building chips, to support AI, right? And and finding a way to not necessarily try to be so forward thinking that you're always having to continuously be pushing that, to a point where you're never really capitalizing on the revenue side of things because you're spending so much time and money trying to be there. I like when I see a company that's right next to them and it's just feeding it. And it's just feeding that beast, right? And can be a little bit more multifaceted and can have several different offerings and can support like a Web 2 and a Web 3 environment, right? Or like customers
Mhm.
that are also still, kind of outdated, right? Because then I think they have a wider net that they can cast. And so I think only early adopters as a business model is a niche type of thing, right? Yeah, you could charge a premium, but I'd rather see a larger audience, right? And so it's kind of a small like theme that I would share is try to find a business model that looks at a wider, more stable market. Because you'll see really cool, innovative
So think
technology.
of the future. You're telling them, don't just think of the problem now, think of the future. What can go wrong? What can go great? Think of all of those things.
And then almost taking like a step before that though, because that's the thing. There's a lot of companies right? So they'll never be able to monetize because they're always chasing a market that's not there yet. And so if they just take a step back and monetize today and then grow revenues, they can have an R&D department in their company that's pushing the boundaries, right? And so I'm just trying to bring them back to revenue because that's really what a company needs to be sustainable. And so that's the only thing I would say is just try not to think to a point where you can't make money because you're too far into the future. Like, because I've done that. I've been there. I had a great business with Beyond 360, as you know, but hardware wasn't there yet. It was when you still had to be tethered to a huge computer that was on the ground, and you had a square with some cameras, and that was your area. Now VR obviously is in a totally different place, and people have headsets at their house, but it didn't used to be that way, and it used to be a lot harder to create virtual environments and to create live streams inside of those environments. And so we couldn't make money then, right? Because there wasn't enough market, there wasn't enough customers. Technology was there. Sure, we built it, it worked, but who cares, right? Because it couldn't sell it. And so that's where I just want to caution people is try not to get to a place where you don't have the opportunity to sell it to anybody. Well, that's great that you did it, but you also have to have a business model. And so I think there's a gap for a lot of founders there, is they have a really cool idea and it is the future, but how can you take it a step back so you could sell at least some of it now while you're building it, right? And that's what I think I would advise people. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So how can our listeners contact you? Typically, I give websites and your LinkedIn. And who knew there was more than one Spencer Elliott? So now I know why you have Spencer Elliott 1 at the end of that. We'll definitely supply your LinkedIn, but we were going to give Plug and Play's website and also Future Funders. Are those solid ways to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yes. Feel free to email me as well, Spencer@futurefunders.vc, or you can email me s.elliott@pnptc.com.
Yeah. And be sure to say that you heard him on or watched him on the Intern Whisperer podcast. Then he'll know, like, hey, that worked too.
Yes, I would love to meet any aspiring founders. Would love to learn about your companies if you think that they're investable. And then we'd also love to connect with anybody from a corporate private partnership perspective or public entity that's looking to work with Plug and Play here in Florida. And so, yep, again, my name is Spencer. I'm so thankful for you doing this, Isabella. This is a great show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you back on the show again. And I'm going to have one of your fellow coworkers on. It's going to be Rosangela Parker. So we're going to be double dosing into Plug and Play.
Awesome.
Well, you have a wonderful holiday and thanks for being available during this holiday season.
All right. And Merry Christmas. Thank you, Isabella.
Bye-bye. Thank you to our sponsor, Cat5 Studios, and thank you to our video production and editing team. Music is by Sophie Lloyd. The Intern Whisperer is brought to you by Employers for Change, helping hiring teams to recruit and upskill their intern talent and employees. Learn more at www.e4c.tech and become a member to reduce hiring
bias and improve your company culture through head and heart smart recruitment and learning. Subscribe to the Intern Whisperer today and show your support by sharing our show, tagging a friend to listen, and leaving us comments. You can find the Intern Whisperer Podcast on Employers for Change YouTube channel or streaming from your favorite podcast channel.